Hello and welcome back to the Global Gaming Business Podcast, the industry's first and longest running podcast now in our 19th year. As always, I'm your host, Jess Marquez, and our guest today is Ismail Vali, founder and CEO of YieldSec, to talk about the company's recent string of studies in the black market and how they've been received by the industry, as well as the details behind YieldSec's military-grade technology and its capabilities.
This podcast is sponsored by iGamingPlayer.com, the premier affiliate marketing site that delivers quality players to your online casino, sportsbook, or poker room with transparency and integrity.
The illegal marketplace has long been public enemy number one for the regulated gaming industry, and new research from YieldSec has posited that these nefarious activities actually dwarf the commercial sector by a wide margin. YieldSec's founder and CEO Ismail Vali has made it a mission to confront these bad actors head on, and has plans to expand these efforts to other forms of cybercrime as well. Vali and I spoke via Zoom in April.
Ismail, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good, thank you. No need for the sir. Just Ismail is fine. Thank you.
You got it. No problem. So you've had a busy streak here. A lot of stuff going on. Definitely a lot of conversation, a lot of buzz. You guys were, or I should say you were first on the show back in G2E in 2022.
Yes.
So for those, it's been obviously a little bit of time since then. A lot of things have happened. Maybe some things changed. So for those who may not be familiar, if this is their first time seeing you or seeing YieldSec, could you just give a little bit of a background of the company and kind of if anything's changed since that time?
Thank you very much, Jess. So we have had a busy couple of years. So we basically started building the platform in 2020. We launched in 2022 in August, and then I spoke at G2E in the October that year and spoke to Roger Gross, the publisher of GGB. YieldSec is basically a technical intelligence platform. So we look at all of the audience and all of the activity specific to online betting, gaming, and lottery. So I had come from operations prior to that. My background is basically 2 law degrees from Oxford, never became a lawyer. Very interested in how marketplaces operate. I'd gone into investment banking straight out of Oxford in New York for Solomon Brothers. Ended up in the gaming industry after a report I wrote, which said that the things that would make money online would include gambling and pornography because people like the anonymity of the internet. That got me suspended from my role with Solomon Brothers for a week and then rehired and doubled my salary because everybody was requesting the report and what does this guy know about the gaming? I didn't know anything about gaming at that time. It was just looking at human behavior. You could see that people were interested in the anonymity, and there is clearly a product that human beings love in gaming and betting, and it wasn't being serviced effectively in most societies in the world. Hence, it grew very quickly on the internet. So I ended up working for Ladbrokes in the UK. That was really a real kind of post-Oxford. That was like a university of gaming and betting, but that really taught me everything about how you treat customers, how you price events, that you need to have a liberal, fair, sustainable offering, and you need to be good with your customers and customer service and pay customers back effectively, as well as offering them bet types that they crave. The whole point of the British legal market for me growing up in the UK as a child was gambling was always everywhere, but it was behind a regulated fence. It was controlled, but it was available to the public. Hence, you had this massive legal marketplace where what's the reason for a black market to exist? At the brick and mortar level, there's very little of it, okay? At the online level, it's growing in every marketplace, including the UK, around the world right now. So YieldSec basically came from after years in operations. I worked at Ladbrokes, then Paradise Poker, Sporting Bets, PokerStars, and then I went into consulting for many firms. What I found in the 2010s, so post the kind of pre-regulation period, pre-2005, when the UK came in with the first kind of large marketplace gambling act, then what's changed in the US post-PASPA and stuff, every client I had everywhere in the world was saying, we're just not making money anymore. Now, I've never been in a position of operating a company as a CMO or COO where I had the luxury of one quarter where I could return negative results. In America right now, we're closing in on 6 years where some executives haven't been able to deliver profit. I don't believe that's because they're bad at their jobs. I don't believe it's because the audience isn't interested. It's simply because somebody else stole the money. People will look at regulation and say, oh, it's because of the regulation. It's because the audience and Generation Z aren't interested in gambling anymore. Yes, they are. The problem is we weren't identifying what the audience is doing and what their activity is. So what we as an industry have constantly, as a legal industry, have constantly been obsessed with is what I've termed the iceberg marketplace, that we're constantly looking at that bright white cap above the waterline and saying that's the industry. Government and the media are often also looking at that bright white cap and saying that's where all the harm and the blame comes from, and these people make too much money. The public are looking at it thinking, well, I don't really care what's legal and illegal. I don't even ask myself that question. It's not in my head. It's not in my heart. It's not on my finger as I'm scrolling these sites. And it's not in my wallet when I choose where to place my bets. They're just finding opportunities because they're asking search, they're asking social, they're asking their community, where can I place a bet on these things? So I wanted to build a system that basically, first of all, wanted to find where is the truth in this? Where is the single source of truth that tells us everything that's going on in the marketplace, not just in the legal industry anymore, because there are many people who can provide you with legal industry information, and we also use that legal industry information to help drive our benchmarking across markets. What I wanted to find was what's really going on out there. What's the scale of gambling activity? And when you go into new markets, Brazil, Chile, that are all talking about regulating right now, when they look at their licensing process and they say, well, there's 150 people on the application list. Well, what's the full spectrum? There's 150 applicants, but if there's 3,500 sites in your marketplace, that's not really a success, is it? And it's also storing up a problem for later on. So this has never been a case of I want to be a regulator or I'm trying to tell people how to do their jobs. I simply saw a system that wasn't working, an ecosystem that wasn't working. I found a military platform that was used for anti-terrorism, counterinsurgency, and anti-radicalization, the kind of stuff that was used to find beheading videos from ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Find that content wherever it is, find where the conversation is, and find which human beings are there. Not to the level of I need to know their identity, but the meta level of we know that you visited these sites, you frequented them once, twice, 3 times. Which pages did you visit? How many times did you watch a video that then linked to content or transactions? So with gaming, it wasn't that big a kind of leap to basically explain that, okay, you're looking for hearts and minds and changing ideology. I'm looking for hearts and minds and changing the revenue piece here. So if you really want to channelize a market, surely what we have to go after is where is the audience? What's their activity? Because when those two things meet, that's transactions. So that's basically what YieldSec offers, is data across the entire marketplace. I'm sure you'll have other questions to ask me how we do that, and I'm happy to answer those. But the point here is understand the total marketplace and understand that what we have today is an American online gaming marketplace, a British online gaming marketplace, German, Chilean, Brazilian. In each of those marketplaces, we have 2 industries, one legal, licensed and regulated, soon to be, hopefully in Brazil, and another one that's illegal, unlicensed, unregulated, unwelcome, and it is stealing revenue. It is stealing tax. It is also stealing opportunity from the innovation that should be coming from this industry, and it's abusing consumers. But the bill for all of that abuse is being pointed to the legal industry to pick up. Now, I don't believe that's a fair system, and if there's anything that motivated me to start this business, this is simply unfair and an unsustainable ecosystem. That if somebody hadn't have said it, I'm sure somebody else would have if I hadn't. But I also wanted to come with a solution that had a platform behind it that could find that activity and show people what was going on.
Definitely, and you know, there's a lot of things in there that I want to touch on, obviously, in a little bit more detail down the line. But I think one of the things that it really brings to mind, especially you know, as a U.S., you know, somebody in the U.S., especially in California, as a California resident, it really does. I think sometimes we in the industry might get a little bit siloed as obviously only talking to people in the industry, and it really struck me. I was at a doctor's office a few months ago, and he asked me what I did. I told him I was in the industry. And he said, "Oh, well, you know, you mean like online gambling and sports betting?" I said, "Yeah, you know, I cover that." And he was like, "Well, it's legal here, isn't it?" And I said, "No, like, no." I was like we just, you know, and of course I'm thinking like in my head, like, of course not. You know what I mean? Obviously, I talk to these people every day, but you know, it's just I think we lose sight sometimes that, like you said, there's 2 marketplaces that, you know, there's a whole other side to these things that doesn't always, you know, that doesn't always get a light shown on it. And I think that's
Exactly. Just
fascinating.
one point I'll raise there. You said that there's 2 marketplaces, and again, it's very easy to fall into that language. There's
Yeah.
one market, 2 industries. And again, if you think about this carefully, and again, I went back to Oxford, got my master's degree in kind of focused on what's going on in black marketplaces generally. So when you start studying this, even labels like the black market, why does that label exist? Why do we call it that? Because that's a label that crime gave itself. Okay. They didn't set out, they were trying to, again, they didn't start that in online gaming. They started it in selling, you know, knockoff and stolen goods years ago. But when they gave themselves that label, it was to convince consumers that there's some benefit here for you. It might be something you don't talk to other people about, but generally you don't talk to other people about it because you get ripped off in the black market. But what attracts you in there in the first place is this idea that, well, there's the high street market, there's the mall market, but they charge normal prices and pay taxes and they employ staff. So I want the benefit of none of those costs associated. It fell off the back of a truck, and therefore I'm going to go to the black market. So all of these labels are things that crime puts in the way, and the semantics of it are interesting because it convinces consumers to do things they wouldn't normally have done. And that's the problem we're facing now, is consumers are not asking themselves the question, what's legal, what's not, what's licensed, what's not. Consumers are just looking for their bet. And if it appears on Google, it appears on Meta, it appears on Instagram and TikTok, I'm all in. That's what's happening. So there's no ability for consumers to differentiate effectively. Hence, I saw an opportunity for a system that could find that content, find where the audience is, and separate audience and content to the point where the legal industry can channelize effectively, regulators can run the market effectively, treasury departments get the tax that they forecast and want to get, and there's responsible gaming contributions, and the legal industry, an industry that features products with risks, which we all know about, that tab can be picked up. But my view of the gaming industry is, if you run this business right, there is a river of unalloyed good that can come from it. And you only need to look at the brick and mortar example of Las Vegas to see that, look what they did. At the point they understood they were ridden with crime, they basically said, let's kick out the crime, let's take control of our city and our marketplace, and let's change this and bring in processes that stop crime coming back. Now, we never did that online. We were all in a rush because we were after the fact of the internet. We were after the fact of online gaming existing. And every regulator in the world has an extremely difficult job playing catch up to try and put in place the right conditions to clean up the marketplace, police it, regulate it, and make it compliant. That's a hard enough job just with the legal spectrum, and also legal firms are adjusting and evolving to a new era of compliance and regulation, player protection, responsible gaming. When it's the illegals who are then entering and there's nothing stopping them doing this, and we go back to these kind of almost stereotypical answers and responses to, well, what can we do about it? They're offshore. We can't get access to them. They're not in our jurisdiction. How will the police won't pay any attention to us? You don't need to go after the operators. You need to go after the ads and the content. Because if you can pour cold water on the fire that's burning that got the consumers there in the first place, that will prevent 80% of the traffic roughly. What you need to get to is an understanding that it's not just one thing. There's no single instance magic bullet here that's going to stop illegal gambling. All legal stakeholders have to work together, and all legal stakeholders have to be aware of their own responsibilities and duties to help push the needle away from crime and towards the legal spectrum.
So that's a fascinating, and I have one more kind of question just before we go into more recent developments. But I have one kind of on the formation and kind of buildup of YieldSec and kind of like the plan, I guess you would say. I think one thing that's surprising to me, or maybe other people around the industry, is like we've said, this is a very broad topic. It's a very not indefinable, but difficult to define thing that you're fighting against. It's not like you're fighting against like a person down the street. You're looking at each other like in the eye. So when you go about forming something like YieldSec, do you think that I mean, obviously, I don't want to insinuate in any way that people weren't, how would you say, concerned about this before, obviously, but it's like, do you think that the reason why something like YieldSec wasn't developed before was because maybe they didn't know exactly how to go about it, or that they were too busy, obviously focused on their own goals and own objectives of, their own things that they maybe didn't have the time or energy or resources? Like, how would you answer that? Like, how would you say that? Why didn't something like this get developed beforehand, I guess, is the long way of saying.
Fascinating question, Jess. I think there's no genius involved in this. Again, there's never has been at any point in my career. I've always done things either that people haven't done well, or I've done things that other people haven't done and tried to test, measure, and scale a response here. So the thing I was testing here was basically, does anybody know what the total marketplace is, what it's worth, and who is participating in that total marketplace? Adults, children, problem gamblers, etc. Show me the full spectrum. Nobody had any information on it. Everybody could offer me estimates, but those estimates were kind of so wildly different from firm to firm that I was like, okay, clearly nobody knows what's going on here. And I'm not saying that as a criticism or saying, I told you so. It was just nobody had any data. So when I started asking the questions of probably 5 years ago now, that I started speaking about this, and I noticed that having been somebody who'd done some things in marketing, I used to get fairly decent audiences at conferences and stuff. The minute I started talking about crime, I had packed audiences every time. So clearly people were interested. People wanted to know, tell me something. If you know something, please tell us, because nobody seemed to be able to control this thing. The other problem here is, how do you define what's illegal gambling? Because we have this specter of what's called gray market as well, which I really don't agree with, but let's go through that one. So a black market or an illegal operator, because I hate getting caught up in this color chart. What's black, what's white, what's gray? It's all meaningless, these color labels. An illegal operator is somebody who is not licensed in the jurisdiction they are taking revenue from. Okay, so there is a test that needs to be applied there, and this is what we do across our monitoring. So when we find operators in the United States, do you have a license? If you do, which state is it in? Because if you don't have a license for New York and you're operating in New Jersey, that should be geo-blocked on some basis, or you should be asking the question very quickly, we're not in your state, sorry, kind of thing. And there's an opportunity there again for operators. Why aren't you pushing traffic to other legal operators? There's a kind of passing the baton here between operators where you've got this patchwork quilt of legality, just to make that point. So there is, first of all, you'll be what's called available. So many websites can be found. DraftKings.com, for example, is massively available all over the world because they are a huge company. They have a great SEO team, and they've comped themselves in many languages to be available everywhere, because I believe what they promise their investors is, we're going to be the biggest thing in gaming. So they have set out on that road with organic SEO skills. Hence, and because Google is still uses English language as 60% of its results, no matter where in the world you are, they can be available on lots of different search engines. They can also be accessed as a website in lots of different countries where they do not have licensing. In some of those countries, you can go through a registration process because it's good to collect data for a marketplace you may be in the future. But at the point you try and place a bet or put money in, they'll tell you, no, sorry, we're not in your territory yet, because they're looking for that opportunity legally in the future. They're just not there today. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what we call availability. What we're looking for is targeting. What are you doing in this territory? So for an illegal operator across the United States, because that's how illegals access, they don't go in on a state-by-state basis, they go in nationally, which also means they buy their advertising cheaper because there is state-based inflation for, well, New York has legal sports betting, therefore the cost of buying legal advertising is through the roof. If you're buying, I'm not saying what I'm buying, I'm selling online clothing, I'm selling online e-vapes or something, sales. If I'm telling Google that for the first 28 days when ad accounts are monitored, I'll be able to buy a bunch of advertising. On day 29, I can shift that into illegal online gaming. But I bought it nationally at much cheaper rates. So there is an inherent weirdness and bias here against the legal industry. They're being, again, cheated in a way. That's an unfair system. So an illegal operator is somebody who has taken steps to get revenue from that marketplace. And from our tracking and surveillance, we are saying you are taking revenue from there, from all of the tests that we do. So we're looking for somebody that's not just available, they have targeted a territory to take revenue from it illicitly, without any license, without any regulation, in the place they are targeting. So you're basically taking money from a place you're not licensed in. I am not interested, and the system's not interested in, whether you have a license in an offshore jurisdiction. That's irrelevant because it doesn't cover New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania licensing. So why are you here exactly? Still taking money from citizens in those states and across the rest of America as well. So that's the fundamental test here. An illegal operator to YieldSec is basically somebody who is not licensed to take revenue from the territory they're targeting.
Well, and it's fascinating too, because I think a lot of people would say, well, the growth, the rapid expansion of legal betting would help to curtail that or give people obviously the legal marketplace as an option. But I think in some ways too, it maybe hurts them to some degree because people look at it and say, oh, well, yeah, that's right. They did legalize, I did see on the news that they legalized gambling and name a state, Nebraska, Kansas, wherever. And they're like, oh, okay, so it must be, it must be on the up and up. You know what I mean? So in a certain way, the expansion, the rapid expansion almost hurts them in some way because it's more recognizable to people instead of just seeing, a random ad like, well, that's weird. I've never seen anything about sport, and name, one of the few states that hasn't legalized versus they're like, oh yeah, I just saw on the news last night. They just signed the bill into, that must be right,
Exactly. So again, there's a piece here which I call rising on the same tide. So all ships rise on the same tide. So the minute you legalize and you bring in advertising for legal brands, you need them to get out there and roam, find their audience, find their kind of their customer base, and start doing business. And then there's the great piece of competition between these legal brands, which creates great circumstances and fairness for consumers. So consumers have been in a golden era in America in the last few years because there are so many new brands coming in, legal ones, that are looking to establish an audience. But how many of those brands have got to profitability in nearly 6 years now since the repeal of PASPA? So there are very, very few who on a quarter by quarter basis, the publicly traded ones, you could look at and say, okay, we're in some record breaking some wealth creation for investors territory here, that the customers are being looked after, investors are being looked after, the firm and the employees are being looked after, and the consumers fundamentally are getting a better deal. The problem you have is, again, opportunity cost. The illegals have taken that away from the industry. So I look at the American marketplace and it's a problem because all of this advertising that's coming in, and now we're at a point in America where the tide seems to be turning, where people are saying there's too much advertising, we need to have more controls, we need to have higher taxes. All of that's concern about the legal industry, but they simply had to turn the tide against an industry that had been illegal for nearly 3 decades. So you're at the point here where the legal industry is trying to do the job of converting consumer behavior. And what we show from our monitoring is that behavior has simply not changed. So by and large, most of the activity is still going to illegals. So that's what's happening is your brand of choice, the brand that you've been with for 3 decades, the brands that give away $30 in free bonuses for the last Super Bowl in February, because they've been in business for 30 years. They can afford to just give away $30 free bets to every customer who's held an account for more than 24 hours. So they're at that position where they're able to do those deals with people. Now it's a problem for legal brands to establish themselves clearly and be able to say, we're able to channelize effectively. So there is a massive problem there where more than 2/3 of the American marketplace is still illegal. Certain states have not legalized, California, Georgia, etc. But you're at a position here where if anyone sincerely believes that there is not online gaming in California or Georgia or Minnesota, if you seriously believe that, please spend half an hour with us looking at our data and we will distance you with that position, okay? This has been going on for 3 decades plus. When you legalize it, it should be a clarion call to say, we are simply cleaning out the crime, bringing in legal operators who can contribute to our commerce locally, our jobs locally, our community through taxation and responsible gaming and player protection, and make sure that they are beholden to somebody, the regulator and the rule of law. And that is not the case if we keep allowing this shadow industry, which in fact is actually the industry kind of dwarfing everybody else. It's not really a shadow, it's not a specter, it's not a ghost. This is the majority of the total marketplace that's being taken away in the vast majority of states and nations internationally. Most of the activity is illegal. Now, when you have a position recently, we're at the point now, a couple of years down the track, that we've been able to monitor globally. We're able to monitor on event by event basis. One of the ones that stands out for me recently was the Oscars betting in the United States. So betting on the film awards, one of the most American of award ceremonies, legal in 7 states to bet on the Oscars, but available everywhere illegally. Customers, especially those kind of customers who come in maybe just for that bet type, that we saw more newbies and casual customers than you'd see across all of our customer personas that we attach to audience types. We saw more women coming in. We saw more infrequent customers who are just casual bettors coming in. Way more newbies as well. And we saw that they were basically coming in because what was being offered in the legal industry was very thin, hardly any awareness of it. Even the New York Times was running articles saying, why don't you place bets with illegal gambling company number1.com? So they were running editorial, not advertising, saying that, oh, this company's having odds on, who's going to win Best Actress, because that was the most interesting marketplace in that ceremony. So there's a piece here where for the most American of events, you cannot bet on it legally as an American. But again, the audience isn't asking that question. They are not even in that same room as we are in the industry, where we're constantly obsessed with, well, we've had so much growth in the legal industry and we're focused on what's going on. The one fundamental I'll point out here about that robbing, that stealing of opportunity cost. We have 103 licensed legal gambling companies in the United States today. Okay, nearly 6 years after PASPA. We had close on 150 about 2.5 years ago. Okay, why is that number going down? because we brought this industry, one of the biggest no-brainers in capitalism. Legalize gambling, they will come because they're already there, aren't they? Surely that money should be channelized and brought into the United States on a state-by-state basis, filling straight state treasury, making sure that there's responsible gaming, coordination across the nation between the states, etc. But we have fewer legal online gaming companies, not because of M&A and because everyone's buying each other. We have fewer legal online gaming companies because they are pulling out of the business. And one thing that really disturbs me in the United States, any business that was big elsewhere and then came to America, it would go through this period with college graduates, the innovation from younger people, the innovation from Silicon Valley. It would go through a period in the United States where that industry would get completely turned on its head, kind of disrupted and turned into something else. That we'd see micro betting, we'd see different gaming platforms, different types of gaming. We'd see a prop bet specialist emerging. We'd see a new DraftKings, a new Paradise Poker, a new PokerStars coming through. And we have not seen that, Jess, not whatsoever. We've got the same tiers that when I first started talking about this, I said there were tiers of American sports betting and gambling operators. Tier one, we have DraftKings and FanDuel, the de facto number 1 and 2 kind of thing. Then we've got the land-based firms going online, so MGM, Caesars, etc. Then we've got the kind of Europeans and Australians who came over to America, mainly to prop up share prices, but also to get a piece of this American gambling gold rush. Tier 4, we have tribal gaming, but everybody forgot Tier 5, the illegals. And they have most of the marketplace, and therefore there is no room for what should be the Tier 5, which should be the up-and-coming new, the kind of newbie type American gaming business. That doesn't exist. And it did exist in Europe 15, 20 years ago, but it does not exist in America today because there is simply not enough money in the legal spectrum to go around. And I feel that investors also take fright at how much of the total marketplace could these people really control? They don't have the marketing budgets of a DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM, but also how can they compete with the illegals offshore who've been there for 3 decades?
Well, watching the ebb and flow of it, certainly, from a media perspective, has been fascinating, and it draws to mind earlier this year after the state of the industry report from the AGA. I asked CEO Bill Miller about the level of advertising and how maybe some level of consumer pushback, and that was more or less his direct response was we have the illegal marketplaces had a 3-decade head start. It's exactly what he told me back in February. So I think it definitely echoes those sentiments very well. I want to get to a couple of recent developments that you guys have gotten a lot of attention for. There's been a lot of conversation about. You mentioned the Super Bowl. So you guys put out a very big report that got a lot of attention about the level of illegal betting on this most recent Super Bowl, obviously a Kansas City Chiefs victory for those who celebrate. But I want to kind of bring out some figures from that specifically. So in the report, it says that there were 228 million illegal bets placed, representing a total value of $4 billion. Those numbers obviously of themselves are headline grabbing and eye-catching and stuff like that. I think it also kind of draws a little bit of ire from, maybe certain folks around the industry, and definitely like I said, generates a lot of conversation on both ways. So could you kind of just, I'm interested, this is the first thing that really piqued my interest from you guys. Could you kind of just elaborate on the study, kind of the impetus for it, what went into it, kind of how it's been received, kind of everything from it?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked this one, actually, because again, lots of people have been we had a period right after we released the Super Bowl data. So we were basically monitoring everything in the US, as we still are. We're looking at things on an event by event basis. And I wanted to really push the team and challenge ourselves to say, let's put the numbers out first. Let's see how people react. And I fully expected to be flamed and have lots of rocks thrown. And we did have lots of rocks thrown. Where we're satisfied about this, but let me explain the methodology first. We look at all of the audience and all of the activity on an apples and apples basis. So wherever people are going, we have no moral line, we have no legal line on that. We watch everything, okay, at the meta level. No data protection rules are breached. I don't know that it's you, Jess, doing these things, but I do know that you're a user in California on an IP connection without VPN. It's irrelevant to us. So we can see all of that activity. I'm also looking at all of the legal industry data where I bought a bunch of stuff from other firms, and I can see that I'm getting to a benchmark of what people are spending. Now, I don't know what people are depositing into their accounts. I don't know what people are doing with their bet placement either. I'm not hacking their bet slip. I do know they've been into a bet slip. I do know that they're a registered user. I do know their user journey, where they were before, where they go next, how long they spend on each page. So from that, the AI, machine learning, expert human teams we have gets to a point of, let's get the analytics working here to understand what's going on with this consumer. What is he doing? What event is he looking at? What bet type is he looking at? So from all of the time you've spent going through a journey, whether you came from an affiliate, an advert, direct entry, an app, you've just installed after downloading it from Google Play, I'm looking at everybody legally and illegally to say, where did the consumers end up targeting for journeys? And what did they do on those user journeys? I then have what we call a value per visit, because otherwise I'd be looking at how much did you place in deposits? How much did you then place in bets? I don't know those numbers, okay? So we had to create our own number to look at everything on an apples basis. So value per visit, VPV, is our kind of holy grail. That's always what we're looking to get to. So I look at all of the user journeys, where those audiences have been, what audience type they are. Are you an infrequent user, a very frequent user, a VIP type customer, somebody that's got no cookie information, no history of ever having been to a gambling company, and all of a sudden you went to one today? What's their feed data from social media? So all of that I can buy anonymously, and I'm able to say, I now have a picture of the audience, almost like a radar for what type of customer are you? The next piece that's most important here, the black box we have, is the YieldSec matrix. So me and the team spent 3 years building this thing. That is basically the battle royale between every site, every app in the marketplace, every commercial opportunity online for this bet type, this event, this gambling type. We have it in that system. So why would you place $100 with BetMGM and get a 25 to 50% bonus when you could go up the road to illegalgambling1.com and get $1,000 bonus for a $100 bet today? So what are the benefits and weaknesses of everything that goes on in that marketplace? So the YieldSec matrix at the high level is like a SWOT analysis between every single opportunity there is. Why place your money here versus there? How much advertising, affiliate recommendations, links, content was there that drove you to it potentially? When you've got there, what are the bonus conditions that apply? What loyalty points would you get for it? How much money could you then push into other product because you're being cross-sold, which is an opportunity unavailable to the legal industry across 31 states basically now of the legal ones. So we've got 7 legal states for casino, 38 for sports betting, and no ability in everywhere else to cross-sell people. And the illegal industry has that ability from day zero, immediately move customers who lose money on Super Bowl into blackjack bets, into slot machine bets. So how we get to those numbers is basically looking at all of that traffic in the aggregate, working out all those different customer personas, getting to that value per visit and saying, here's all the people, that's what they've spent on the average journey, according to the different customer personas. So that's how we come up with the bets placed. We've seen enough people go through the process to get to bet placement. How many bets they place there is also a factor of what kind of customer persona are you. I'm just looking for a single bet. I'm looking for a parlay. Are parlays even available legally? All these kind of questions are asked in the matrix. So once we've gone through that, we can get to a very clear idea of this is how many bets were placed. This is how much money was placed in handle. And this is where we'll probably net out to on GGR. We published our numbers first, okay? So we were out, I think, the Tuesday after Super Bowl saying it's 1.4 billion for the illegals and 4.1, I believe, 4 billion, I believe, for the illegals. The illegals we're never going to know, okay? Short of the Justice Department raiding some of these firms and pulling their books and accounts and QuickBooks and the rest of it, we're never going to know those numbers. On the 1.4 billion and the bets placed and us saying that basically this is how many bets were placed legally, lots of people called us out because they were saying things like, look, FanDuel is half the marketplace. And FanDuel had already announced that I think they'd had 17 million or 20 million bets or something like that. So therefore our number is way too big. It's insane kind of thing. And FanDuel should be half of it. And you're saying it's 100 and so legal bets I said was 122 million. So surely the FanDuel number should be half of that, should be 60 million kind of thing. And they said it's way less than that. FanDuel announced that their number was about 22% of what the marketplace was, which is kind of in line with us. And the revenue, in terms of like the handle that was placed on the event, we said 1.4, which is obviously a rounded up number. When the industry published their numbers about 10 days after us, it was 1.398 billion. So we were right on that number, okay? Now, if we're right on the legal number, surely we have to be fairly right on the illegal because we're using apples and apples way of comparing everything and a very similar way of looking at if you place a bet, if you place a deposit with one of the big 3 legal firms, you're able to deposit anything from $10 and up. Okay, you can refund from $10 and up as well. With the illegals, you're having to place a deposit of $100 to $150 in the first place. So you're putting a way bigger investment into illegal operators because they want to get more money from you because they pay higher commission charges because they're illegal. They don't have good relationships with banks. In fact, they're mainly lying to the banks that they have relationships with. So we factor for all of those things as well to say you'll have a higher propensity to place more bets and higher value bets with illegals than legals because legals have made it really convenient for you to open an account and put a very small amount of money in because they're trying to get the market to move to them, to migrate to them and adopt their services. The problem is people have got too much money that's already pregnant with so many illegal guys right now. So on the Super Bowl stuff, I didn't feel that there was any sense of, I didn't come to be criticized and vindicated. I came to test the platform, test the team, and also show the marketplace that we're not thinking about this event the way that we should. Looking at it as some kind of criticism of the legal industry or a failure is not what we set out to do. And some people have accused us of that on social media, and I try not to read all of this stuff because, again, my journey here with this business was basically set up something that becomes a single source of truth for all legal stakeholders. So if you are legal licensed in a jurisdiction, you can buy data from us. So can regulators, so can affiliates, so can justice departments and treasury teams, so can media platforms like Google and Facebook and Instagram, because all of you are legal stakeholders who at some point need to hold hands to make things change. Because if we all adopt this position of backing into our corners and thinking, well, that's not my problem, that's the regulators. That's not my problem, that's for the police. That's not my problem, that's for somebody else to deal with. We will never fix this. And all of the divisions between us create more opportunity for illegals.
Well, I would definitely agree with the point that, I think from my perspective, one of the interesting things, and I try, obviously I just like everyone else, I'm busy. I try not to, read through individual comments or whatnot, or, people get mad. But I think it is interesting in the sense that, there are so many charged emotions because they're all in the same boat of trying to fight the same fight. You know what I mean? So if we're not even on the same page in terms of what our goals are, what we're trying to work towards, it makes it difficult for somebody else to come in, or it makes it difficult to, try to, I guess, address those issues when somebody is trying to present them, because it's like, well, we're already fighting with each other so much that it's hard to then look past that. You know what I mean? So I think that was the interesting thing for me, again, from a media perspective, from a withdrawn perspective.
I'd say lastly on that, Jess, that it was interesting that most of the stuff I saw in the first few days was just the number, and 1.4 billion can't be right. It must be wrong, and it has to be wrong, and you're wrong, and the system's wrong. And I said the team were desperate to respond, and everybody wants to be reactive. Luckily, I've been through some things in my life. I try not to react to the point where I hope I've turned it into an art form. So I just said, let's just stay quiet on this. Let's see where the legal industry publish their numbers, because everybody will have to say what's happened at their side before the quarterly announcements, because it's such a big event. So the same way that we used it as an opportunity to go, hey, look, we're going to show you something here that maybe you haven't seen before. We're not necessarily saying everybody's going to like it, but we're as close to the truth as you can get from all of the reasonable, rational, logical data that we could follow. And we're the only people out there who have taken the step to go, you know what? It's not just about the declared numbers. It's not just about the GGR and the handle. This is about the audience where it meets activity, because that's where the handle and GGR are created. If you don't look at both of those pieces, how can the equation balance effectively? So if all that we look at is activity, you forget the audience completely. And I think there is a piece there where we have been forgetting the audience. Okay, so when we started dragging it back to what ads did they see? Which affiliate offers did they interact with? How did they end up at that illegal site? And also, how are we so far into this kind of bad paint here, where all the customers are so immersed in thinking, well, that illegal brand's better for me than you guys. You legal guys would tell me that. And again, some of the behavior that we see and some of the comments that you drag, because the system is all seeing, pulling data in all the time. So when it starts to monitor and do surveillance across user groups and forums and Reddit posts, you start to realize that there's this slightly weird nexus with things like illegal streaming and illegal gambling, where people are basically going, well, I'm not going to pay ESPN to watch the game. I'm not going to pay for the NBA Live League Pass. I'd rather go to NBAstreams.com or one of the other kind of illegal sites, and I'd rather download, kind of have it, not even download anymore, have a free stream of the game and be able to bet in vision from an illegal brand, but I see that as a customer convenience move. So recently, the NBA with the League Pass product had a load of criticism because it has in-vision betting now, that you can see it while you're watching the game. You can place bets while you're watching the game. And everyone was looking at this like it's some kind of revolutionary move that the NBA have done. Again, all they're doing is playing catch up with tech that already exists in the illegal spectrum. So what they're doing is kind of going like Vegas did, maybe we should clean out the crime here and have processes to stop that coming in the future. But if we don't all work together with the online piece, we are not a municipal city council that can control this. We need to try and work together to get to a point here where ships do not rise on the same tide, because those ships from the illegals are kept out of the harbor, period. And that's the piece where we haven't been able to do it, because if you don't look at the ads, you don't look at the posts, you don't look at the social media engagement, you don't look at all the search engine results, if you're not looking at all of that stuff that created the barometer where consumers think, no, I'm better off over here. I like the temperature here. It's more convenient. They give me better bonuses. They have all the products. They have betting on the Oscars, no matter where I am. I don't have any of this geo location stuff. I have no issues about even the rumors and the misinformation that are spread about tax. Because whenever there's a story about legalization and taxation on gambling company profit, typically outside of New York, where there's tax on handle on sports betting, you're now at the point where that will be weaponized by the illegal industry to put stories out on social media to say things like, hey, tax-free gambling. It's happened in Sweden. It happened in the UK. It's happened in the Netherlands. Just the political debate around taxation on the industry turns into this piece where you now start telling consumers, oh, did you know that they're taxing your gambling? But they won't. They never have.
Well, speaking of working together and controversy as well, you guys also released it's now technically April, so last month, you guys released figures for the overall U.S. market, which I thought was interesting because, and I'll have some figures from that as well. So that one you guys estimated was 40.9 billion in GGR for the U.S. as a total of 860 operators. The 40.9 figure was interesting to me because I speak very frequently with the NIGC, and I think their record number from 2022 was, I think, that same figure. I think it was like 40.8 or 40.9. So that just gives, it certainly gave me a perspective of like, okay, well, tribal industry just had is coming off of a record year, and that's basically the same number that you're saying for the legal side of things from 2023. So that's fascinating. So yeah, I guess just kind of the same discussion for that as well. I mean, that's obviously something that's much bigger in scope, obviously, than just one event. It's also, very specific, as I said, a total of 860 operators. What's kind of been the reception from that, and kind of, what was kind of the work that went into that one as well?
So we have a client, again, we generally, we're in the press a lot. People ask a lot of questions. It's not something that we go actively looking for. We're fortunate that people are interested, at least. And I think recently that interest has boiled over a lot. So I have more people to be involved in this and more spokesmen now, because I just literally don't have the time. And also I think people will get sick of listening to me about this stuff eventually as well. There's a piece of this with our work in the US. So we have a client, the Campaign for Fairer Gambling, funded by Derek Webb. So Derek Webb, somebody who's been in the industry for many years. He looked at this and said, I would like to take a different approach to this, and I'm interested in working with you guys. We had clients in America. We have an open view of clients. We're not here to be anyone's mouthpiece for whatever any campaign or position they wish to take. What we are is independent and neutral, and we work for all legal stakeholders. So as I said before, the only thing YieldSec as a business, and me personally as the CEO and founder, are partisan about is legal versus illegal. Our whole point of reason for being is to move the needle against that crime and make sure that legal operators are able to get the marketplace and the customers they should. State governments are able to raise the tax they should. National governments the same. Responsible gaming can be effective. Self-exclusion for players who have problems is effective, because that's another point we can probably touch on later in today's conversation as well. Self-exclusion has just become something that's been weaponized by the illegal industry because they know there are customers there. They know they can make money there. And self-exclusion schemes by their very nature set up the most endangered species gaming reservation, and nobody's policing them. Nobody's looking at what's going on there. Legal operators obviously shouldn't be having to pick up the tab or carry the can for that, because what did they do exactly apart from making sure those customers couldn't transact with them anymore? But now you've got illegals actively hunting those kind of customers and that audience. So with the US work, we're independent and neutral. We work for all legal stakeholders. If you are licensed and regulated in the jurisdiction you're taking revenue from, you can have a conversation with YieldSec and buy data and be a customer. So we are not here and never have been to be partisan about, are you pro-gambling, anti-gambling? Any of these moral questions are not ones that we kind of entertain. The whole point is independent, neutral data. We're very open about our methodology. It's published on the website. We're the only people out there who are looking at all of the audience, all of the activity to come up with our best estimates on this would be the value that they'd place in bets at this website versus this app versus this website if they came via this affiliate, if they're this kind of customer. So the AI and machine learning for the common good, which is one of the very few instances I've found, to be honest, leading this business, that we used AI for something where it does benefit people to get to that point where my vision with this was lead to the river of unalloyed good coming from an industry that generally people think is morally dubious, generally people think should be criticized, generally has stigma attached to it. But I've always seen it from the nearly 30 years I've been in this business now, looking at this and being able to say, this business has the ability to create substantial change for the better. Yes, it is an industry that features products with risks. And could we all please move on from that now to say the legal industry are the ones who are carrying the torch here for, we want this business to remain in the light. We're doing everything we can for this business to be in the light. But the people who were there, who some of whom were our peers, some of whom were colleagues 25, 30 years ago, have taken a wrong turn. They should try and get their act in order, legalize, come back on shore, seek reparations, whatever they want to do with governments, but do something about moving away from a spectrum. And fundamentally, one point I'd raise here, Jess, is when I started this, I saw two risks. A near risk that there were people who were like me, gaming executives, who basically, after the US declared Unlawful Internet Gaming Enforcement Act in 2005, UAGA, once that came in, there were a lot of people in the industry who were kind of like, oh, we'll still carry on operating. Who's going to find out? If we're small enough, nobody will really notice, and small enough could be a lot of money in a marketplace like America. So initially, there were some gaming execs who made bad decisions, and that was motivated by greed. That was the near risk. The far risk, and I believe we're in that period now, is when you are telegraphing to organized crime and transnational criminal groups that you are not just having an interest in the gaming industry because it's good for money laundering, which it always has been. How many bets were placed on blackjack? Was it 10 $100 bets or 100 $10,000 bets? Nobody really knows. That's why there's no handle for casinos. We always show GGR. So money laundering was always an interest for organized crime with casinos, and there are great rules from regulators as to how to avoid those things. But online is now becoming interesting just because it's a great business, period. Now, if you are also showing them that there are 3 decades of American illegal gambling operators and nothing has been done to them, okay, nothing. So we had some poker scandals in 2011 when we had Black Friday. There were a bunch of sites that were corrupt, Ultimate Bet and Full Tilt Poker, that basically were stealing customers' money. And when they went out of business, did those customers get their money back? No. And everybody forgot about the consumers again. We're right on the edge of another period like that, I believe, in this industry where you need to make sure the enforcement is done correct, because just going after big illegals and thinking it's about big game hunting to take out of circulation XYZ illegal brands, that's not the point here, because consumers will ultimately suffer. But what you could do here is create an almost FTX style run on the bank, where you start telling consumers, if you have money with these sites offshore, know that the US government, know that the state governments are looking into them. Law enforcement is looking into them, and we're going to try and move the needle against these firms. So take your money out. Your money is much safer with these firms. And that's a piece here that really baffles me, that the level of public awareness education around legal, illegal, what the risks of illegal gambling are, what they're doing to your computers when they illegally stream NBA matches or the NFL or the Super Bowl, that's not free. Nothing's free, okay? So all of the illegal streaming, that is a big conduit. About 30% of all illegal gambling we see internationally comes from illegal streaming. Hence, YieldSec is at this moment, we're building a streaming platform as well to show sports streaming first. Why is sports streaming leading to so much illegal gambling? But it also gives us a window into movies and TV as well then. But if consumers feel that this stuff is free, none of it's free. It all comes with illegal Bitcoin mining, child sexual abuse material being stored in your computers. Your computer is the product, okay? Them giving you free content, nothing's free, okay? You're the product. That's the point for the audience. And that's the thing, that when we have safety belt laws passed in cars and stuff, You told people why they should wear safety belts in cars, but we haven't told anybody why they should gamble with legal gambling brands, because governments are always on this kind of knife edge of, we want gambling, we want to tax and regulate it, but we don't want to encourage people to do this necessarily. You kind of have to encourage them to not be gambling with those guys anymore, because we can clearly show you they are. So you do have to do some public awareness education here and create some of the scandals and enforcement against these firms in an organized fashion. Going after the illegals would be good for community and audience to see that, and for them to also understand this is an ecosystem, very precious one. And if you get this right, it can provide benefit for commerce, community, and consumer. But that means it has to be in the light of the legal spectrum. It cannot have this shadow that's basically eclipsing it like it does now.
Well, that's fascinating, and it makes me think of, at least, just the difference. I think in my mind, it brings up the difference, obviously, between the history of the U.S. and European markets, as well as, like, the legal European market is much, much, much more mature than the U.S. market, and so that's kind of been a piece of this whole conversation that's kind of been interesting to me, is like, do you feel that I guess you would say, lessons learned in Europe, or maybe lessons not learned in some cases, like, what do you think the play is there? Like, is there anything to be gleaned from, the things that have happened across the pond, now that we're kind of reaching our own maturity? I mean, what would you say between the two sides here? Because I think that's an interesting part of it, at least to me.
It is, Jess, it's a really good question. I think the biggest thing from Europe is obviously, for all of the US states, look at Europe and say, is there a European country that does not have regulation, licensing, and taxation and player protection in place? So California, Georgia, Minnesota, you kind of need to look at that and kind of go, why did they all do that? Because you have to control this thing, okay? It has to be a controlled industry. Industry that features products at risk needs government and federal oversight, needs state oversight to basically put in place what needs to happen here. So our position as YieldSec is, whatever a destiny a state and national government wants, we can help you achieve that. So if Saudi Arabia approach us and say, we want no gambling, everything's illegal, we don't want any presence or any of these products in our marketplace, yes, we will practically tell them it's almost impossible to stop everything. But if that's what you want, you can buy the data and analysis to get yourselves to the point where you can effectively police the marketplace. Because again, we're not the regulator. We have no ambition to be a regulator. I have none. Okay, that is a very complicated, difficult, and political job, and it needs to be taken on with a good level of industry experience and respect of how do you make this thing work effectively. So look at the European example of every European nation has legalized online gaming, and they are struggling with certain controls on that. One of the biggest issues that's come out of Europe recently, one of the things that we, again, weren't looking to find, but because we look for all of the content, all of the audience, we found that there was a preying on the self-excluded communities. So we found that in the UK with a scheme called GamStop. We found it in Denmark with a scheme called Rofus. We found it in the Netherlands. We find it in France. So everywhere that there is a self-exclusion scheme, even in recent markets like Germany with the Oasis scheme, exactly the same strategies, because affiliates and illegal operators, the affiliates who are happy promoting illegals, are looking for, I'm going to prove a business model here. I'm going to go to certain marketplaces like the United Kingdom, very low share, the black market 2 years ago, we were at 0.5%, then it went to 2%. Last year, it went to 4%. So we had a quadrupling, then a doubling again last year. This year, we're in a calendar across sports in the United Kingdom where there will be not 1 week where you cannot bet on soccer at the high level, because you're going from the 23-24 football season straight into the end of season cups and leagues. Then you're going into the European championships of soccer. Then you're going into the Olympics, and then you're straight back into the 24-25 season. So it's a punting without pause calendar is what you have this year. If you're a self-excluded customer, you cannot gamble with any of the legal brands in the UK, okay? They're all supporters of that scheme. But you can go to the illegals. And what the illegals have started doing is buying up terms like not on GamStop betting, best bets not on GamStop. If you even type in the term GamStop just into Google, you'll get a bunch of GamStop casinos, GamStop poker rooms, GamStop sports books. So why does that exist, and why hasn't anything been done? Again, Google, Facebook, the social media platforms are also all legal stakeholders who all need to work together. So there's a piece here of not just thinking, again, there is a magic bullet. The regulator going to see Google will solve this. It will just morph and pop up somewhere else, because if the illegals understand one thing really clearly, You pay the least to make the most in every single marketplace. Now, if that means that I can basically take an illegal sportsbook, an illegal casino into the United Kingdom, where I would not even try to compete with Ladbrokes, William Hill, Paddy Power, Betfair, all these enormous brands, and there are 2,500 legal brands in the United Kingdom across all of the licensees under the United Kingdom Gambling Commission. So for me to have any presence in the UK, I need to be spending what per week on Google just to get traffic? $10,000, $20,000 a week just to get footfall without that even converting. Now, if I'm competing with all the other legal spectrum guys. If I choose, however, to go, you know what, I don't care where the money comes from, because all I'm interested in is the money. And I don't care about the consumers either, because I don't give a monkeys about them. I couldn't care less if they're children. I couldn't care less if they're problem gamblers. If all you want is that money and you're an illegal operator, you'll go straight for that not on GamStop stuff. Because now you have an endangered gaming reservation and there are no police. It's open for poachers. So we were almost nervous about opening that one up, because I didn't want to publicize that the not on GamStop and not on self-exclusion scheme term was something that was being weaponized. But when I saw the growth across last year, that clearly an illegally promoting affiliate community brought that to the UK in 2022 before the World Cup. They made money from it, and then they took it to other markets, and it carried on making money. So now we've gone from a few dozen of these guys to hundreds of them within months. So that's something that when we start setting up self-exclusion schemes in America, when you start dealing with responsible gaming and player protection at the level where it becomes, we have it in a few states, we have it in many states, we have it nationally across America. That's something that really needs to be looked at carefully. And it's one of these points of the nexus between having legal gambling, having to have an awareness of it's an industry with products with risks. Therefore, we need to take care of the audience. We need to make sure that kids are excluded. That piece will be weaponized by the illegals, because they'll look at it and go, we're the only game in town for that audience. And we know that they're interested. And especially with how children have been really pushed into skins trading, loot box trading, the esports betting, a whole awareness around that area by illegal gambling brands. And they are some of the people who, in the same way that the poker industry really adopted UFC sponsorship and stuff, illegal gambling brands have literally embraced esports kind of thing. So they own that whole area. They own the spectrum across it. And you are dealing with a teenage audience going into college age kind of audience. And now you're at the point where they've got disposable income and they've got bank accounts. So the first port of call for most college age students in America, if they're going to gamble, it will be with illegals. And that's the piece where we're trying to do something about not promoting too much college advertising and stuff for legal brands, but there is other gambling available because of the spectrum of there's legal and illegal in the marketplace. So the piece here that we really need to look at is try and join the dots as legal stakeholders. That's a big part of the work that YieldSec does. All of our data and analytics are not just meant to tell you the sky is falling. We're trying to tell you what actions to take. As on the basis of when we first started, we got this all wrong. We were doing hundreds of page reports telling you every dead body in the graveyard and all the problems that came from it and all the rest of it. We got to a point with clients by getting regular feedback, and the team are really good at that. It's not just me talking all the time. They're also there to kind of take the temperature and go, are we getting what you need from us? Are you getting told how to move the needle against the things that you want to make more money? You want to pay less cost. You want to mitigate your risks. You want to achieve certainty for a state or national government. You want to increase your tax receipts. You want to have control of the marketplace. For a media platform like Google or Facebook, you want to make sure that you're not accepting advertising that could lead to criminal risk for you, because after the fact that somebody's told you all of those ads you sold led to illegal gambling, led to abuse of consumers, you're on the hook for theft again as well. So the point for us was get it to actions where people can understand, this is what I need to do this month, this week. These are the things I need to do for my own SEO so that I appear higher than these illegal sites do. This is where I need to start buying my advertising. This is what I need to do in my affiliate relationships. Do I want to appear alongside illegal brands? So there's a whole bunch of actions you need to take. That's different on every event, every Super Bowl, every March Madness, every NBA championships. So it's this constant need for month to month, people need that reporting. And that's why we were lucky recently that we moved to new tech standards, new tech platform, new data supply for our third-party data that we also bring in. We're able to really get those costs down now that we've grown the business successfully enough. we were able to really commoditize the product from the point where we were tens of thousands of dollars a month to the point where we're now thousands of dollars a month, and people can add on services as they need them based on, I want to know more about affiliates. I want to know more about self-exclusion. I want to know more about child protection. I want to know more about responsible gaming, where I can find my audience more effectively, how I reduce my costs of cost per acquisition and CPA, how do I reduce churn? So there's a whole bunch of bolt-on services, and it's a lot more like having a mobile phone contract than anything now. So we're really pleased as a team that taking on really smart people, taking on that AI and machine learning and tech piece, and also just making sure that we challenged ourselves at every stage here to say, we know this is going to be bumpy. People have never said this stuff before, and nobody ever had a total marketplace view before. But we didn't come here to necessarily disrupt. We came here to start bringing fairness back. And fundamentally, what runs through us is that piece that I keep bringing the team back to. There is a river of unalloyed good that can come from the gaming industry if we run this thing right. So all we're here to do is help everybody else, who the people who are really running it, we help them make the best decisions possible and help them follow the right actions to get them to profitability, because there's nothing wrong in making money, especially when that money is taxed. There's nothing wrong in having an audience if that audience is without issues. When they're self-excluded, they are absolutely excluded. When they're children, they are forbidden from these products. And we know that this is an adult entertainment area that, again, I want to see the innovation coming out of online gaming that you saw at the brick and mortar level in Las Vegas. So when Las Vegas got to the point late 70s, early 80s, and they said, let's kick the crime out of this and put in place processes that stop crime returning, you led to the making of the adult resort casino. Okay, that model has gone all over the world, in Macau, at every place you see, even across tribal gaming now. That model that was built there was on the basis of a legal, sustainable industry that doesn't just make money on the gaming, it makes money on the food and beverage, it makes money on the hotel rooms, it makes money on the nightclubs, it makes money on the consumer experiences and the shopping. That's what should be coming from online gaming. It should be sprawling across development and innovation, and we're still in this kind of, we're stuck in one lane because of all of the crime that surrounds us, and the fact that they were there first, the fact that they've been there longest, and the fact that they're more trusted and seen as brands of convenience and choice by consumers. And we fundamentally have to push that to the periphery and make sure we set up processes as a group of legal stakeholders working together: regulator, government, treasury, law enforcement, operators, affiliates, media platforms, where we're able to say this doesn't come back anymore because we put in place the right processes to prevent that in the future.
Well, I think that's definitely true, and it's definitely something that won't happen overnight. Dare I say, year over year, maybe decade upon decade. But I think it's definitely, as somebody obviously who works in the industry, represents the industry, I think it's definitely a necessary fight for sure. Um, I just had one more for you, and I want to. This can be quick. I know we've touched on a lot of different themes, and at the risk of sounding repetitive. Um, I think, one of the things that makes this conversation so difficult is the fact that gambling, I mean, whether it's in the US or in the world, it's so segmented, you know what I mean? This is an issue that you could zoom all the way in or all the way out, to the entire world if you wanted to. Um, and so I think from the absolute biggest perspective possible, like in my mind, I'm thinking of like if you were invited, and maybe you have been, I don't know. I know definitely been around a lot of different folks, but if you were invited to kind of take this hypothetical role, right? I don't want to say regulator because it's not really what I have in mind, but like let's say like something like the UN, right? If the UN came to you and said, "Hey, we want you to be some title like illegal gambling consultant emeritus or something, something very regal sounding, um, something that encompasses obviously the broadest spectrum possible." And they said, "Okay, we want you to give a presentation or something like along those lines." What would be, I guess, kind of the underlying theme of that, or that, what would be one thing that you would say in such a role that, obviously you don't have the power to just, you're not like a czar, you don't have the power to just enact, sweeping legislation or anything. What would be the one message that you try to, I guess, instill upon, all these different actors to kind of go towards this one goal? Like we've been saying, the goal here is to reduce, stem the flow of online gambling and reduce, as many people, as much harm as possible. So what would be your kind of underlying message to kind of, I guess, unite everybody towards that front? I know it's kind of a lofty question, but like I said, it's something that I've been thinking about.
It's a very interesting question, and thank you. It's very flattering you to think about it in that way. Fundamentally, with this, I'm not a regulator. Okay, I didn't
Yep.
set myself up to be a regulator, and a regulator is a job I do not have the skills for. All I'm here to do is help support legal stakeholders to make the right decisions at the right time with the most complete set of data across the total marketplace. As I keep mentioning, that river of unalloyed good. Now, people often will attack me for saying that if they come from an anti-gambling perspective, and I don't have a pro or anti-gambling view here. I want to remain independent and neutral, as does the team, as will the tech, as will the processes we have. The whole point here is we have a whole group of legal stakeholders and actors whose jobs it is to make money, to channelize an audience, to raise taxes and protect consumers and protect audience children. They already have those roles in the mandate. I'm simply here to offer them the best data possible. Now, if anybody approached me to speak about this, I'm always happy to speak about YieldSec, but the whole point of YieldSec is, again, human insight led to it. AI and machine learning created its abilities and data across everything, and ability to zoom in at that meta level and say, we can see all of it, okay? So whatever it is you're challenging us on, whether it's find out where the affiliates are who are promoting illegal pike out, okay? One of the most underlooked products. But again, it all has to be put into a threat matrix view of 5,000 guys betting legally on the Super Bowl in New York is a problem, especially if they've got significant amounts of revenue. 12 people playing illegal pike-out poker is a problem too, but it's not so much of a revenue issue. However, YieldSec sees all of it. So regardless of language, ethnicity, background, we'll still know that that piece of illegal gambling is going on, and it's beholden upon us to tell our stakeholder clients what's going on there. So the point here is, I wanted not for this to be about personality, not for it to be about politics, but to have a system that could basically show the processes that lead you to understanding as much as you can about the marketplace. Now, all of us needing to hold hands together, I'm aware that all of us are kind of looking at each other slightly suspiciously, whether it's operator to affiliate and affiliate to regulator, etc. So everybody's looking out. And again, it needs to be a sustainable business for everybody. Taxation needs to be raised. Profitability needs to be made, salaries need to be paid, technology needs to be invested into, CapEx needs to be expended on this thing, local jobs need to be created. But all of that opportunity and money, fundamentally, Jess, is on the table right now. You wouldn't necessarily, in most marketplaces, need to make one new person a gambler, if you look at it that way, because all of that money is being stolen right now. So you don't need to go out there and make your customers spend more. You don't need to convert children to gambling. You don't need to be preying on 18 and 21-year-olds to make sure that the day that they go legal age, you're then capturing them as customers. Most of those people have been gambling for years already because they are gambling with illegals who do not care and do not ask those questions. And what it's embedding in our societies and in our consumer experience is a hatred of gambling, period, a dislike of gambling, a moral position about gambling, when you should look at this and say, for as long as human beings have existed, so has this activity of gambling and this behavior. So the best thing you can do is keep it in the light, tax, regulate it, control it, and make sure that it's fair, safe, and sustainable for everybody. And yes, that includes legal operators. Yes, that includes affiliates. Yes, that includes the media companies who get advertising revenue. Yes, it includes the teams and leagues and the consumers too, that everybody should be able to get something from this business that human beings have fundamentally been fascinated by for as long as human beings have been on this earth. But we are fundamentally going to disable and cripple ourselves if all we do is argue amongst ourselves as a legal stakeholder group, and we don't look out for what the enemy at the gate is doing, because that's what's been going on to the point where we're almost outside the gate and they're on the inside. And that needs to change very fundamentally. So YieldSec is fundamentally here to make sure that happens. The mission of the business, and I do see it as a business with a mission. For me, it's not just about making money. For me, it's always been about, there was a problem here. There was something I could perceive, and I needed the tech, the team, and the processes to deliver that. Fundamentally, I also need the customers to deliver that too. But what I want to get to here is the client base, where we've commoditized the platform. We have clients across the spectrum, operators, regulators, treasury teams, media platforms. I want to move it into the streaming piece, because what we found in gambling was there wasn't just the great illegal gambling robbery, as I refer to it. There's also the great online revenue robbery, where when I look across online spectrum now, what we found from gambling was the nexus for streaming. Streaming is a whole new area being stolen from, and that's the pay-per-view broadcast companies. That's the sports teams again. That's the athletes also. the professional management firms for those artists, for the athletes too. So there's a piece here where in streaming, there's the great online revenue robbery. What we found from gambling was payments and crypto and the rise of payment wallets coming from crypto, where so much of the illegal revenue is being funneled through wallets where it's almost impossible to determine how much money went to these events. And also to show how difficult it would be for law enforcement and taxation authorities to look at that money and go, where's that money from? Where did that money come from? How was that money laundered? Whose money is it in the first place? And then you get to generally the consumer industry, where you can draw very clear parallels between what's happening in online gaming in America right now and what happened in America with the legalization of the cannabis industry. That right there, you've got another industry that has 40% of the business is still illegal a decade after legalization. Now, there are lots of reasons for that. The location of dispensaries, nobody wants a place that deals marijuana right next to their house or their school or their business. So there's lots of reasons for it. But what it's also led to is the rise of a whole new area of, despite the legalization of marijuana, you have tons of illegal sales online now. So we thought the Silk Road and places like that were just the end of those industries, the same way that we thought with streaming that taking out the Pirate Bay was the end of it. The industry never stops. Crime never sleeps on this stuff. It will always keep morphing and moving on. And I often use the example of it's like trying to catch smoke in your hands, that you might think you've got it, but when you open your hands, there's nothing there. So it will constantly move on. What we tried to build with YieldSec is, people often liken it to kind of like, you can go after one illegal gambling website and a minute later it pops up somewhere else. It's like trying to play whack-a-mole. YieldSec is basically the most advanced system for defense against whack-a-mole. We know where every mole is. We know that they're going to keep popping up in different places, and we're ready for it with as many hammers as possible. But those hammers are used by our clients, not by us. The point for us was to be independent, neutral, the silent machine in the background, looking at everything, aware of everything, and able to give people reliable, clean, easy to understand, actionable data that they can make sensible decisions from, actionable decisions, and move the needle against crime to make sure that this is a safe, fair, and sustainable business for all of us for the future.
Definitely. And, like I said, it's a fight that will go on as long as there is gambling. It'll definitely, the growth, the rapid growth of at least the U.S. marketplace, from what I can speak to, will definitely not curtail any sort of, opposite reactions the other way. So again, thank you very much, Ismail. That's all I had for you today. This has been a fascinating discussion that we touched on a lot of different things. And like I said, I will definitely be on the lookout for YieldSec. I'm vastly interested to see where you guys go next. And I think there are definitely a lot of other people as well. So thank you again for coming on.
Yes, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you. And everybody who's been watching, thank you for listening too. I really appreciate it.
Hope you enjoyed this week's podcast, sponsored by iGaming Player, the premier affiliate marketing site that delivers quality players to your online casino, sportsbook, or poker room with transparency and integrity. To learn more about the topics we just discussed, visit ggbmagazine.com. Subscribe to GGB News to get all the news of the gaming industry delivered to your desktop every Monday morning. Sign up at ggbnews.com and use the coupon code GGB180 for a free subscription. Don't miss a single episode of the podcast. Subscribe on Amazon, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify today. So we'll see you next time on the GGB Podcast.